And I can feel the emotion like bubbling up. And it's like at the back of my throat. And I know that there's some people in this space who are going to be totally cool if I fall apart in tears. There's going to be a bunch of people in this space who are going to be like, oh, what do we do with Claire? What have we done to Claire? Claire's broken. How do we like? Wait,
what should we do?
Yes,
what should we do?
Do we give her a shot?
Serena.
Hello, and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
I just realized that I wasn't paying any attention when we started that. But we've started, so let's keep going. I was at that point where I was on autopilot. I'm like, we're starting. What are we doing again?
A podcast.
Oh, we're recording a podcast. That's what we're doing. So, he's gone. One of my new furry roommates was like tapping my leg a minute ago, and I told him if he stayed where he was, that he could come say hi.
Oh, he's going to try and come in from the side.
Try and come in the background. There he is. There's Hemingway. Hemi. You say hi to everybody? There you go. That's one of my new furry roommates who's coming to say hi to everybody. If you're not on the video podcast right now, if you're just listening to the audio, imagine a black and white cat sat just behind Serena's shoulder. That's kind of does it. He's incredibly curious. He's like, what are you doing in my house? It looks all different. There's like lights and sound and all the things. Hemi, come here. There we go. Right. Okay. So now we've done that, should we actually get on with the podcast?
No, they just wanted to listen to us talk about cats.
Right? Probably not. Some of them would. Some of our listeners I know would be like, yes, more cats, less needs. So today we're doing a really important episode because today we are answering another question that's come from our listeners, from our community. And the question they were asked was burnout, how to recover and try to stop it from happening again. Serena?
Well, I know the answers for those.
Go ahead. What's the answers?
Meet your needs and meet your needs. Okay, everyone. That's it for today.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to do it. No, obviously that's not the end of the episode, but
those are the answers.
Those are the answers. We're going to give you a little bit more today than just meet your needs and meet your needs. I mean, although you know that's going to be our answer to pretty much anything. So let's look at what burnout actually is. So burnout is the result of chronically unmet needs. What that means is needs that have been consistently compromised or consistently unmet for a sustained period of time. And we have 6 things that we can give you today, which will help you when you experience burnout, to help you recover and also to avoid it from happening again. So the first thing we want to share with you is to be aware of your capacity. Now, the reason we say this is that like when we are aware that we're experiencing burnout, it can feel very tempting that we feel like we have to do absolutely everything in our power to recover from it. Like now, quick. And especially for some of those type A's among us or recovering type A's among us. Raise your hands, everybody. Yes, that's both of us. Those that kind of recovering perfectionists, that perfectionism can kind of take over and it can cause us actually, the interesting thing with this is it can cause us to compromise some needs to try to meet other needs. And this is something that happens all the time. People often come to me and they're like, oh, I don't think I'm meeting my needs. Well, the chances are you're actually meeting your needs all the time because everything you do every second of every day is done to meet your needs. So it's not that you're not meeting needs. It's just that maybe you're not meeting them in ways that are particularly healthy, or you're meeting them in ways that actually compromise other needs. So that's one of the things that can tend to happen. And this tends to show up when this kind of perfectionism kicks in. The best thing you can do is to be gentle with yourself during these times. You're human. I know. I hate to break it to you, might come as a bit of a shock. You're human and that's okay. So if your body is calling out for rest, try to honor that first and foremost, because when you do that, it will mean that you're going to be better resourced when you get to the kind of further stages of recovering from burnout. So the most important thing to remember is to make sure that the measures that you're using, the things that you're trying to do in order to help you with burnout, are actually in alignment with your current capacity. And the reality is, if you are experiencing burnout, your capacity is going to be very, very low. So we're going to want to start small, and we're going to want to build up slowly in order to get to the point where we actually have a greater capacity with which we want to maybe do more. So you want to make sure that you're not draining one set of needs as well in order to meet others. So for example, like a lot of people think, oh, I need to do exercise. I know exercise is good for me. That's going to meet my needs. Well, yes, that's true. But if the greater need in that moment in time is actually rest, then to exercise would actually compromise your needs. Doing something to help with burnout that you don't have the capacity for. So things like, a lot of people, they're like, oh, I must do a course to figure out how to deal with my burnout.
Let me learn something more.
Yes, let me learn how to not do burnout, but I don't have the capacity to do a course because I'm burnt out right now. And again, it's that whole trying to meet one set of needs and costing another. So you need to, another airplane. Welcome to Key West, everybody. You need to make sure that you adequately recover from the burnout before you begin the healing process. And in fact, the recovery is the first step of the healing process. That's the first and most important step, because you have to recover your resources to then deal with the other aspects. So it's important to remember that this process is going to take time. It's okay to be gentle with yourself. Trying to rush through it and get to the end quicker is actually likely to extend the process, because you're likely to try and do more than you've got capacity for, which is going to have you to burn out, have you burning out even further and even faster, so you've got more to recover from. So you want to be sure to honor where you're at every step along the way.
You also want to focus on the needs that have been most compromised for you in this time.
Right.
We're all impacted in different ways and to different extents we experience burnout. So in order to support yourself best, we need to focus on the needs that have been compromised for you. Mm-hmm. So this might be that your emotional well-being has been impacted because you've not allowed yourself to feel what's been coming up. So you may want to look for ways to release that pressure valve. And I have that feeling all the time. Previously, for long periods of time where it was a steam kettle, it was a pressure valve. It would build up and then boom. I'm going to be honest. I've experienced the boom at times where it's not really been more of a boom. It's been more of a slow meltdown. Yes. Like all of a sudden, that really is. I guess my boom has gone to a like, oh. You can literally see my capacity just like.
Well, and the funny thing is that, and this is actually a really interesting point, because I know you're someone who used to boom. Like we both are. Like we were both people who previously that pressure cooker would have built and built and built and built, and unless that pressure was released, bang, and it would have exploded in the face of whoever was present at the time. That's certainly how I used to do things. I know that you used to do them the same way too. Mm-hmm. But now, rather than this outward bang and boom that affects everybody else, because we're aware of needs, there that kind of meltdown is that internal like that at that point, no, I can't cope anymore, and this internal kind of collapse almost happens. So yeah, you make a really good point.
Yeah, and what we want to do in that point, like if you're a pressure valve, what do you need to do? Mm-hmm. You need to release, or if you're under pressure, you need to release the pressure valves.
That's the answer.
Right there. And that's the pressure valve on your emotional tank, because we've mentioned it in other episodes. Your emotions, things get compounded when they're not dealt with, and it's one thing on top of another and on top of another, and it may not be a big deal right now, but you held on to it, and I guarantee it's going to be a bigger deal because you held on to it. When it comes up, then
and it's combined with all the other things that you haven't processed as they've come up.
Yes, all of the emotional charge.
Yes.
So by allowing yourself to experience and express these emotions when they're present and when they come up, you're able to manage them better. And it can be something as simple as journaling or talking to a trusted friend. There are many options on ways to just kind of let the out. Like we're not looking to let it all out at once in one space. That's great if you're able to process that, but it is a process. Sometimes it takes a couple of things to meet those needs. Sometimes you need to do a couple of different ways to really get that full feeling of like, I can release this.
And actually, there's an interesting metaphor that I often use with clients around this particular piece, around the emotional piece, which is that when we haven't dealt with the emotions, we've got a lot of built up. If you imagine your emotions are a little bit like a little stream. It's kind of just slowly bubbling through. And if you process the emotions as they come up, that's what happens. They just bubble through slowly. It's nothing very dramatic. Yeah, there are going to be moments where there maybe is a bit of a rush or a bit of a lull. That's okay. But what ends up happening is that when we don't process those emotions, it's like someone builds a dam. And the longer that dam stays there, the more there is this kind of buildup of the water behind the dam. It's like, what are we going to do? And we're aware of that. So what it means is that we are... So I've got a fly in my face. I don't know where that came from, but I'm like, I don't know if you can see it on the video podcast, but I'm like, I'm trying to avoid this fly that's flying right in front of my nose. It's gone now. Okay, we're good. So we've got this kind of pressure, like of all this water that is being held behind the dam. And what ends up happening is that we then end up afraid to let any of it out, because the fear is, if we let some of it out, the whole thing is going to flood through in one go. But what ends up happening is that actually, if you create like a little doorway, a little release pipe, if you like, behind that, where yes, okay, there's going to be a bit of pressure behind it because there's a bit of a backlog, but if you allow it in manageable chunks and you allow yourself to process it through, then what ends up happening is that the water behind the dam goes down and the pressure releases. And once you've done that, and it can take a period of time to do that, it can you can do it, as I said, Serena can do it. You said you can do it all at once. I've been there. I've done it all at once at times. I've also done it with a more of a kind of drip feed approach. They both have pros and cons. I mean, when you do it all at once, it can be a little overwhelming at times. But what it does mean is that at least you process it all in that period of time, and then you can kind of get more back to an equilibrium again. Likewise, if we don't have the capacity to process it all at once, either the time or just the emotional resources to be able to deal with that, then doing it over a longer period of time to a lesser extent can help. But what ends up happening is that when we do that, we allow that kind of water to drop down behind the dam. And then what happens is that we get back to that stream again, that trickling stream that comes through. And once we've dealt with the build up, the backlog, if you like, of the dam, then what ends up happening is that we can allow ourselves to do it as it comes up. And that means that we never get back to that space of, oh my God, I can't. I was watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy this morning. One of my guilty pleasures. I love a little bit of Shonda, but one of the doctors in it, there was a doctor, a couple, and they've got a problem with a pregnancy. And in it, she says, I don't want you to hug me, because if you hug me, I'm going to start crying. And if I start crying, I'm not going to stop. And it's that feeling of being so terrified of any of the emotion coming up, because we know there's that backlog there and we're afraid it's all going to come out in one go. And what happens is that when we allow ourselves and give ourselves a space to process that in the way that works for us, as Serena said, maybe journaling, talking to a trusted friend, there's other ways as well, which we'll get to in a minute. What it means is that we stop that overwhelm and that fear of those emotions, and we allow ourselves to get back into that streaming, bubbling brook. That okay, there are times sometimes where we have a heavy rain and it rushes through for a few days, or maybe
here comes
weeks.
My waterfall.
Yeah, absolutely. Here come the waterworks. And it might rush through for a period of time, but that's okay. There are going to be times where it actually reduces down, and there's almost nothing there. It's like a teeny tiny trickle coming through, and that's much easier to cope with and deal with if we have dealt with the backlog and we're able to process as we go through. But we want to deal with that backlog in a way that works to that capacity, as we said before.
Yes, and I definitely think there is a lot more to go over in how to process what you're going through.
Yeah.
I do want to mention we are focusing on emotional experience and expression in this example, but it's really important to know that while all your universal needs are important, the ones that have been most compromised for you are the ones that need to be the priority in order to best support yourself and recover from burnout.
Absolutely. And the other thing is Serena said what we're talking about here is really important, and that is just about emotional experience expression. That's a really big topic, and it's something we are going to do. We've got a planned mini series coming up a little way in the future, where we're going to do a mini series just on emotions, because it's a topic that comes up a lot around needs. So stay tuned for that. So the next thing that can be helpful when you're dealing with burnout is that when you're ready, allow yourself to process what you have gone through, the things that have allowed you to get to burnout. Because when we're burnt out, or when we're on the road to burnout, the need to cope with what we are currently going through and just to continue to function at that time can sometimes mean we're not actually able to process the experience while we are experiencing it. I mean, a really good example about this, which is the pandemic. Like for a lot of people, they couldn't process what they were going through at the time. And still, some people are still in that position where there's not been the space to process what we have experienced because we're still dealing with it. We're still in the process of doing it. I found this when I came to Key West. I was in the UK for probably the first maybe 18 months of the pandemic experience. That's what you want to call it. I'm sure there's lots of other terms we could use to describe
I could replace experience with a couple of choice
I'm sure
words.
you could come up with a few. I'm like creative examples of ways we could describe it.
I don't want the FCC to get any ideas from me.
Right. So what we want to, that 18 months of being in the UK was a very, very unique experience for me compared to a lot of people. It was very different because of certain things that I had in terms of my living situation, in terms of where I was. I was living with somebody who was at risk. Extremely vulnerable regarding the coronavirus. So we had to be more careful. For that period of time, I barely left the house. I mean, I maybe went out a handful of times in the 6-month period. We weren't even going out to get groceries. We were getting them delivered. It was a very, very unique experience. And unique in the sense that there's a lot of people who didn't experience that. There's a lot of people who did as well. So I'm sure there's lots of people who had it as very similarly or a lot worse. So it was just a very different experience to a lot of the other people I knew who were going through the pandemic. And when I left the UK and I spent 2 weeks in Mexico because I couldn't fly direct to Key West at the time because there was a presidential order that we weren't allowed to fly directly from the UK. So I had to go to Mexico for 2 weeks in order to be able to be allowed into the country. And I remember when I first got back here, that all of a sudden the situation had changed. It was very, very different because I was living on my own. I wasn't living with anybody else. Things were not as locked down here as they were in the UK. And I think was it a couple of weeks after I got back that brunch happened?
Yes.
It was like 2 weeks.
Yeah, It was almost...
It was maybe a week or two after I actually got back onto the island. There was a brunch for a group of friends of ours. And all of a sudden I was sat at this brunch and things felt, relatively speaking, normal compared to how things had been. And I'm sat in this room full of people who I love and enjoy spending time with, and there's great food and everyone's chatting and everything.
And she hasn't been around, we haven't seen her in almost 2 years.
2 years, yeah. And so these people I want to spend time with, and I can feel the emotion bubbling up. And it's at the back of my throat. And I know that there's some people in this space who are going to be totally cool if I fall apart in tears. There's going to be a bunch of people in this space who are going to be like, oh, what do we do with Claire? What have we done to Claire? Claire's broken. How do we
what should we do?
Yes,
what should we do?
Do we give her a shot?
Serena.
Yeah, Serena, what do we do? How do we deal with Claire right now?
And it actually was me looking at her and I was like,
yeah.
Are you okay? And she was like to me, she's like, no.
Well, the funny thing is that initially I was like, you needed something from the car, remember? And I was like,
amount of Mardi Gras beads.
Yeah. And I was like, I'll get it. Because Serena was asking her husband to go get it from the car. I'm like, I'll go. So I grabbed the keys and I went down and I sat in the Jeep and it all came flooding out of me. This sobbing grief and the emotional processing of the previous 18 months. All of a sudden, I had space to feel it because I was no longer in it. I was in a different version of it and we're still not out the other side of it. And obviously there's still stuff to process. But that experience that I'd had, all of a sudden I wasn't in it and needing to cope with it anymore. And I was back. And I remember Serena came up to the Jeep and was like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just everything's coming out all at once.
I'm feeling all the things.
I'm feeling all the feels. Oh my goodness. And I was like, I can't go back up there. So I think you went upstairs and got me a mimosa and some food. She's like,
a mimosa to go cup.
Yes, take these home with you, go and process. And that's what I did. I went back home and I allowed myself to process what was there because all of a sudden I had space for it. And so it's a really good example of being in a position where coping with it, I had to cope with it. I couldn't process it while I was coping with it because it was so immense. And the second I wasn't needing to cope with it anymore, it came flooding out.
And every moment that you were holding on to it and not able to, because it wasn't, you're the type of person, you're able to process
Oh,
through
I'm willing
your
to
emotions.
process anything.
Yeah, like you don't mind going deeper and feeling it. And in this situation, like, you know, you weren't able to. And every time you weren't able to cope with it, you were burning yourself out a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. And I don't think a lot of us think of it in that way, like that we've been, all of us over the last 2 years now, have been in a situation of slowly burning ourselves out, in the sense that we can't, to cope as quickly as things are happening.
Right.
For most people in this, you know, period of time we're in, it's hard.
And we've been in a collective trauma, and that trauma takes
Multiple.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, and that the emotional energy that it takes, the resources it takes to cope, and to cope with not processing the experience as we're doing it. It's not a question of like, nobody's been doing it. I wasn't doing anything quote unquote wrong by not processing it. I just didn't have the capacity to also to cope and process at the same time. So it's a really good example of what we're talking about here. So the thing is that coping is a really important, like, coping mechanism in the short term. It means that until we actually process it, we're carrying around that emotional impact with us. It's taking energy to keep that with us.
It's almost like coping is carrying.
Right,
like
absolutely.
You're just carrying it with you in your little bag. Be
Yeah,
like, oh yeah,
okay.
you're here, pain in the ass, but you're coming with me for the ride.
Absolutely. And it's like, I remember watching somebody I know who was a mum giving a talk about, I think it was about guilt, but it's a very similar process. She was saying, like, if she was out for a nature walk with her 2 sons, all of a sudden, like, one of her sons would be like, oh, hey, could you carry this for me, mum? Like, can you carry my jacket, or can you carry my t-shirt, or hey, could you carry this rock, or could you carry these twigs, or
Can
whatever
you carry
it was.
me?
Yeah. And the thing is that she said, because you pick it up bit by bit by bit by bit, you don't realize how much you're carrying until you put it down. And the same is true with any of this kind of thing where you're carrying the emotions of the experience. And again, we're talking predominantly at the moment, we're focusing predominantly on emotional experience and expression, but there are a whole other bunch of needs that are going to have been impacted and that we need to honor as well. Emotional experience and expression is just a good example, because I think a lot of us can relate to it really easily. So that whole thing of, yes, we're carrying it, but we don't realize how much we're carrying, because if you think about it, week 1 of the pandemic, we were all like, oh, what's happening? Oh, there's like a little bit of
I don't need a mask now.
right, and it's that whole thing of like, oh, it'll be over in a couple of weeks. I remember I was supporting a friend with a divorce proceeding in court a few weeks before. It was in February, and obviously the lockdown started in the UK in March. And I remember that the solicitor from the other side, we were trying to come up with a new date because we needed more time. And we were looking at schedules and calendars and everything. He said, well, of course, unless this like coronavirus thing comes in and like that affects our ability to meet. Everyone in the room scoffed at him. I like myself included was like, don't be ridiculous. Like, there's not going to be something that's going to really affect it that much. 2 years later, they're still dealing with the backlog because that's what happened. So we didn't realize. So what we were dealing with after week 1, after week 2, after week 4, after week 14, after week 24, like, we didn't realize how much, and we're still carrying that stuff often from week 1 because we haven't processed that, because all of a sudden, when we want to process it, we're dealing with week 2 now. And then when we want to process week 2, week 4's come along, and it's like, hold on a second, we don't realize how much that we're carrying that we haven't processed until we've got the space to do so.
Right. And I think that happens a lot with people in a personal interaction too. You're like, oh, this wasn't a big deal, or you shrug something off, and then you hold it just a little bit. And like I said, it creates that pressurized, that steam pot where you need to release the valve, because you're like, I can get through a week of this. How many times have you said, I can get through this? Isn't a big deal. I'll get through this. But how many times do you get through it and get to the other side and then be like, that was a lot to get through. Let me take a moment and let that sink in. Let me process it. Let me heal from it and begin that process, because it's a total process. But we're like, oh, I got through that. Well, adulting, here's the next thing.
Right. Let's just keep going. And we don't take that time to process.
I'll get to it. I'll go, I'll take a vacation and I'll process it and I'll rest. No, you're going to take a vacation and then you're going to start the process. You're going to come back and realize you didn't have enough time because you haven't recovered.
Well, and the thing about it is the vacation becomes about recovery rather than rest and actually replenishing and nourishing. So yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the questions that we get asked more than anything when it comes to this kind of thing is like, how do I process an experience? Like, what does that mean? And one of the easiest ways is to allow yourself to fully feel and fully express any of the emotions that are or that have been or are present as that, like, to process that. And obviously the caveat here being we want to do this in a self-first way. So we want to do it in ways that do not negatively impact yourself or anybody else. So in order to help with this process, especially it's easier when you're in the moment, when you're actually experiencing the thing because you're in it. So being able to feel it fully when it's happening often is a lot easier. Sometimes not, because sometimes we have a coping mechanism that comes up, but often we can connect to it a little bit better if it's actually currently happening. If it's happened a little while ago, we might want to use something to help us remember and reconnect into that experience to really fully process it. So it can help to just take some quiet time just to reflect on what happened, just thinking about it, maybe journaling about what happened, like actually writing down what happened, because to help you to connect to what it was that you've experienced and therefore how you felt about it. And as you do that, you want to allow the feelings and emotions to come up and be fully felt. And once they're being fully felt, it's not enough to just feel them. We also want to express them, because feeling them is the internal piece. We want to connect and feel them fully. Expressing them is about releasing them and actually getting them out of the system. Now, there are a number of different ways that you can go about doing this. A lot of them are quite creative. Not all of them. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but they can be things like writing, about drawing or painting, singing, dancing, making the sound of the emotion. That's a really great way to kind of verbally get it out of your body. Moving your body in a way that correlates with how you're feeling. Crying, shouting and screaming. I often have said to people, go scream into a pillow right now. Like, you don't want to scream in a way where you're going to terrify somebody else. That's not a self-first way of doing things. But if you scream into a towel, you scream into a pillow, you're still getting out of your body without impacting anybody else. And the key is that when you are expressing them, when you are in that process, is to recognize that in doing so, you're shifting them from an internal experience, something you're feeling internally, to moving them outside of your system and releasing them bit by bit as you do. And the thing is, as we always say, emotions are our way of processing our experience. Once we have processed the experience, once we fully felt them, we don't need to hang on to them anymore. So we want to be able to allow them to release and move on.
You also want to find the way of meeting your needs that specifically works for you. Mm-hmm. And it's important to remember when it comes to needs that there's different ways of meeting needs that work for different people at different time in different situations. Like the way you meet it one time might not be the way you meet it another time. The way that you meet it I meet it might not be the way Claire is going to meet it. Yeah. So you're going to want to find the way of meeting your needs that specifically works for you in that very moment with what you're currently experiencing. Because we let our minds do a lot of our kind of directives. And if you let your mind think...
Directing,
yes.
Like, go do this. Go do that.
You're going to feel this way because this is how you should feel. I'm one of those people. I process emotions a little bit differently than a lot of people. And some people look at me and they're like, what is she doing? Because I'm processing, it might be something that would elicit tears and sadness in one person, but I choose to laugh at that point because that's what's present.
Or even sometimes you're not choosing to laugh. Laughter is just the spontaneous way that it comes out of the system.
Yeah, actually, yes, because most of the situations where I've laughed when it wasn't appropriate, it was nowhere I wanted to be laughing. It's one of those things like I don't know, but that's what needed to, for whatever reason, that needed to be expressed in that moment. So a couple examples for you. Let's say that you might be feeling tired and that you need rest. Some days the way to meet that need is going to be taking a nap in the middle of the day. Other days it's going to be going to bed early the night before. And other times it's going to be sleeping a little later. It's all meeting the same need, but it's doing it in different ways dependent on what your capacity is at the time and what you're able to actually do to meet that need.
And which way is going to work best.
Yes.
Because there are some days when having a nap in the middle of the day makes me feel groggy. It makes me feel awful. There are other times where it's like, oh, hello, power nap. Like I'm on for the rest of the day then. There are some days, again, like going to bed early. I just lay there and I'm like, okay, this is not helping.
I was actually saying yesterday, I came in and I was like, I've been really trying to be mindful of my sleep. And I know my body needs sleep and we've been, working really hard. And I came in yesterday, I was like, I've actually found right now it meets my needs more to wake up early in the morning, to give myself that buffer to just kind of get into my day and to
just kind of be, isn't it?
Yeah, to just be in my space, be in my own energy, and let the thoughts, okay, what am I have to do today? Because I was like, oh, I need to get rest. I'm going to sleep. I'm going to sleep in, and this is going to meet my needs. And then I'd wake up, and I'm like, oh crap, I got to get all the things done. And
go.
and some days that's what I need to do. I need to sleep in. But right now, I'm like, no, I need to. That's not meeting my needs, so let's find the way that will.
Yeah.
And what we always invite people to look for is the 80-20 rule. So what we want is the way of meeting the needs that will take 20% of the effort, but it will create 80% fulfillment of the need. Now I'm going to say that again. The 80-20 rule is the way of meeting the need that will take 20% effort, but will create 80% fulfillment of the need.
Around. And it's like that's a rough experience, but that's what you're aiming for. In an ideal world, that would be the ideal that we would suggest people go for.
Yes, you need your own kind of internal balance. Like, it doesn't look like this, it doesn't look like this. It's going to look more like that. So you want a little bit of effort for a lot of fulfillment, and that is possible.
Yeah.
We do it. We do it daily. We do it.
And for those of you who aren't on the video, we had like the hands were in different places. So it's like, you don't want it where the hands are equal, where effort in and fulfillment out are the same. You definitely don't want it where effort in is massive and fulfillment out is a little bit. You want it the other direction. And the further you can get it in that direction, the better.
Yes. And so basically it's the lower the effort, the higher the benefit, the better.
Yes.
The best way to find these ways is to ask yourself the question, what way of meeting this need will work best for me right now? And see what thoughts come up. There are no wrong thoughts. There are no wrong things. If you're like, oh, I feel like I want to move like this, then move like that. I'm moving like the wacky inflatable car salesman
outside
guys.
The car sales. Like, yeah, absolutely.
But if that's what your body wants, if you have that urge to do it, do it. Your body wants that. It's releasing something. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense in your brain. Your body knows what it needs. So ask and listen to its response.
And I think that's the thing. There's a really good point that you kind of brought up there, which is
that this is the coolest dance move ever.
That
is totally worth subscribing to Patreon right there.
if you want to laugh, if you want to smile, you want something that's going to make your day, subscribe to Patreon, watch the vlog, watch the video podcast of Serena doing the dance. It's worth it, trust me.
I'm bringing that to the clubs.
Oh yeah. I've completely forgotten what I was about to say.
I brought up a good point.
Yes.
And it wasn't about that dance move.
No, I don't remember what it was. What were we saying before that? You were saying about, that was what I was going to say. So often what ends up happening is that what we do is we prevent ourselves from doing the things that actually would really work for us because we're so afraid of what other people will think or how other people will feel or how we may be judged for it. And part of that is because how other people think and how other people feel, we may be meeting our needs for a little while. So we need to figure out how to do that for ourselves so that doesn't impact us in the same way as it has done. But in the interim, what you need to do is you need to remember that your inner knowing knows the way of meeting the needs that works for you. And by slowly starting to meet your own needs, that focus and that the fact that what somebody else thinks, the effect that will have on you and the prioritization you'll put on that, the weighting on that will start to ease away. It starts to melt away. I watched last night on YouTube, a friend of mine showed me a video. It was like a social experiment. This guy had traded up from a paperclip to a round the world trip. It was amazing. He's like trade this for that, and eventually he got to the point where he traded up for these tickets for the round the world trip, and he wanted to continue the experiment. And the experiment, what included doing was seeing if he could find a stranger who would be willing to go on this round the world trip with him for 7 days, covering 3 different continents. I'm gonna find the video. I'm gonna post it in the show notes so you can go watch. It was such a cool video. Is he still looking
for somebody?
I'll go. Afraid not. And he did this by knocking on doors in Dublin, like literally just knocking on people's doors and be like, hey, you want to go on a round the world trip with me? And the funny thing was, I mean, most people are like, what? Like,
I'd be like, this is either going to be the best trip ever. I'm going to be a movie of the week.
Yes, exactly. Like, I'm gonna die. So the cool thing, the thing that I loved about it, and the reason I'm bringing this up was that the guy that he eventually found, he'd spent like the previous like 4 or 5 years caring for his father who'd had Alzheimer's, and his father had passed like a couple of months beforehand, and it was this person's, I don't know whether sister, friend, girlfriend, whatever it was, said to him like, would you go? Because initially he's like, yeah, no, that's not a real thing. This is not legit. And eventually they talked and figured out it was. And she said, would you go? And he's like, oh yeah, I'd go, but my passport's out of date. They went to the passport office, got him an emergency passport because they had to leave in 2 days. And literally they got same day passport. But the reason I'm bringing this up was because you got to watch it, because this guy, his energy and his attitude in life was beautiful. He was just like a kid in a grown-up's body. He was like so in awe of everything. He was so enthusiastic about everything. He went out and made friends with, I think it was in Istanbul. He went out and made friends with all the bouncers one night, and like as he's walking through the road, the bouncer's like, oh yeah, my man, like how you doing and everything. It was his energy and his willingness to do what worked for him without caring what anybody else thought about him. And it was so inspiring to see. It was so beautiful to see somebody going, you know what? I don't care what anyone is going to think of me. I want to go up and shake hands with this person. I want to make friends with this person. I'm going to get excited and I'm going to get enthused, because quite often we dampen that. It's like, oh, well, what will people think of me if I get too enthusiastic? I mean, some of us less than others. Some of us are less concerned about what other people think, and we go a little extra at times without concern for that. We have some stories. We will be telling them on future podcasts, I promise.
Never be around Claire and I and let us know that you're uncomfortable with us being comfortable with. Well, the thing we'll give you a full show in a self-first way.
Absolutely.
It would never be to like, but we'll dance in the middle of the restaurant if we so feel so. If it's not impeding the service of others or whatnot.
Yeah.
But we'll get up and be like, I could just see us at, like one of our favorite restaurants if our favorite Uptown Funk came on. Like,
oh, totally.
We have a little dance routine that just kind of comes up. Like, do it because it feels good.
Yes.
And like, doesn't matter what Susie, Joe, whoever thinks at the next table, because it's not affecting them. Like,
and the reason that people do is because that the perception of other people and the other people around us and the people that they care about, and even strangers, it has been used as a way, because we don't know how to meet our own needs. We're so dependent on the world around us to get our needs met that impacts and affects us. So when you know how to meet your own needs, you can do it in the ways that work for you, irrespective of the impact of how somebody else will think. And so, as Serena said, self-first way, like we're going to do it. We're not going to do something that will come at your cost. If you are genuinely uncomfortable, if you're genuinely unsafe, we'll go do it in a way that works for us, that doesn't cause you any harm. We doesn't impact you negatively. And actually, we've got a series coming up. We've got a little mini series coming up on being self-first, where we're going to go into this in more detail, so you can understand what we're actually talking about and get it a little bit better. But I think that it's but the thing that's cool for the two of us is because we know how to meet our needs. Even those situations where previously I'd have been like, oh, really? We're going to go there? It's like, okay, what need is not being met by me being anxious about doing this? How do I meet that need? Okay, let's go. Let's do this.
Actually, I think my birthday party was kind of a perfect example of that. Claire threw me an amazing surprise party. All that glitters is an old. I actually haven't talked about glitter a lot recently, which is kind of odd for me. It comes up in a lot of conversations. But if you haven't heard, I have a little thing for glitter. And to be...
Little thing for glitter.
Yeah. Teensy tiny. And not everybody appreciates glitter the way I do, which I understand. However, like, there's a lot of times where I feel like I have to kind of dim my sparkly shine. And I was able to embrace it. And I was able to fully just literally bask in the glitter, throw it up and twirl under it. And my friends that didn't want to be a part of it, I was like, cool, thank you for coming. I won't douse you in glitter, but if you let me, like, let's have a dance. And some people got into it, some people didn't. But a couple of years ago, I would have been like, oh, what will they think? Oh, I can't have as much fun as I want to because somebody's going to judge me.
And actually, we literally had handfuls of glitter that we were as walking down Duval Street, which if anyone knows Key West is like the main drag in Key West where the majority of people will be. But rather than, and it's interesting because I think there would have been times where you would have held back from doing this. There are times also where you would have glitter bombed anyone, irrespective of what they thought, and irrespective of whether it worked for them, because it worked for you. And that's also not being self-first. That's the selfish side. The selfless side is that, oh, I don't want to upset anybody else. And what happened was, as we were going about, like down Duval Street, we would say to people like, do you like glitter? And they were like, yes. And be like, great. And we would have like a little glitter bomb party with them. And if they said no, okay, enjoy your night. And we kept going. And that was the cool thing, was that we found a way of doing it which really honored us and our needs and didn't compromise anybody else's. But also we weren't caring what anybody thought of us, because we were doing what worked for us. And we knew that actually in that situation, what somebody else that we don't know, even the people that we do know, I mean, some of them I think looked at us at some point, were like, really? Yes, really. Even the people we do know, we're like, okay, we're going to do us. And actually it was kind of an interesting night in that respect, because we had a group of people together, and at various points that different people like disappeared off and did their own thing. And again, previously that might have bothered one or other of us, because I'm like, oh, I spent all this time putting this together and everything. We were like, no, we're having fun. If people want to join us, great. And if they don't want to join us, great. We're still going to have fun.
Where's this person? Oh, probably eating. Oh, yeah. I hope they're enjoying themselves. Yeah. We're dancing right now. Right. I'm not eating. Like,
exactly.
You know where we are. And it worked.
It worked so well. And it was such a great night. Such a great night. I'm sure we will share more about it on another, on future episodes.
We'll have a glitter episode.
We'll have a glitter episode. Yeah. Like all that sparkles. Absolutely. So anyway, the next thing that can be really helpful with burnout is to stay consistent with your self-care. Because the thing is that self-care as a concept has been commodified and commercialized over the last probably, 10, 20 years. So we've got ideas in our head about what it is. Like, you've got to buy something. You've got to go and pay for an experience to have self-care. That is, I'm going to use the very British term now, bollocks.
Bullshit.
Yes, there we go. We got both sides of the pond covered. Hopefully that works for everybody else around the world who might be listening as well. So the thing about
if not, please pass along your words.
Oh, yeah.
Sub in. Like, I love expanding the vocabulary.
Absolutely. Like, let us know what are the words we can use. In fact, learning some new words, that could be fun. Like, I like that idea.
I'd like to learn another word for asshole.
Okay.
You realize what I almost said.
Yeah, I totally see where that was going. And I appreciate the pause to clarify the language. So anyway, moving on for Serena's desire for another asshole, which is where she was going. The thing about it, self-care isn't this thing that has to be bought. It's not something that requires a lot of stuff or requires a lot of people. Self-care is actually nothing more than taking a little bit of time to meet one or more of your universal needs. I'm going to say that again. Self-care is nothing but taking a little time to meet one or more of your universal needs. So when we've experienced burnout, our needs have been so consistently impacted that one of the things that we need to recover and heal from this is to create consistency in meeting our needs again. Now, the reason for this is that when we've been burned out, it takes time for our system to recognize that our needs are both being met again currently, and for it to have a reasonable assurance that that they're going to stay met, that they're not going to be compromised again in the future. And therefore, that's what's required for our system to be able to relax again. Because what happens is that we have this high vigilance, this high alert that happens when we're in burnout, that we're looking for the next thing that's going to hit us, or we're looking for the next thing that's going to compromise our needs. And so we need that consistency to be able to release that vigilance that has been created by having those needs compromised so consistently. And at these times of coping and healing, our systems are in need of that reassurance, and consistency with meeting our needs is how we give that reassurance. Because what does it want reassurance of? That our needs are going to get met. What does it need to know? That we know how to meet them and that we're going to consistently do it. So when we consistently do it, that provides that reassurance. So it's better to do a small thing every day to meet one need in a small way than it is to do like something big once a month to meet like multiple needs. So it's better for you to be doing something, maybe doing a couple of stretches, like moving your neck or whatever it is that like stretches to feel better each day, than doing like a yoga workshop shop for an entire day once a month. That, like, think about it in terms of your physical body. What's going to do your physical body better in the long term? That consistency. And the same is true with the meeting of your needs. It's having that sustained experience of having your needs met that will provide the reassurance to your system that you're now safe, that your needs are met, and that they're going to be taken care of, and that you will be able to start recovering from that burnout.
One thing that we want to remind you is that it's okay to ask for help.
Is it?
It is.
Oh, cool.
I promise you, it is okay. And I want to say, we're human. We're all human. We go into this, and, we kind of joke about, like, you're human. Oh, shocker. Mm-hmm. But really, we're all human. Like, I think oftentimes it's easy to forget that. Mm-hmm. And being human, we need connection and community in order to survive. That's part of meeting our needs, is having that connection and community. Mm-hmm. So asking for help actually helps to foster that need. Mm-hmm. And it can sometimes be really, really tempting that when we're aware everybody is dealing with their own stuff, to feel like we shouldn't ask for help from others and we shouldn't ask for their support, especially in kind of the context of the pandemic and everything that's gone on the last couple years. Everybody is in a situation. Everybody is trying to cope with what's going on, because this isn't the norm for anybody.
Right.
And we think, oh, I can't bother this person. I can't bother this person. You can still ask for help. Mm-hmm. And they may have ways that you didn't even think were even options.
Right. And they may not have capacity, and that's okay as well, because you can then ask somebody else. Like, it's mm-hmm. okay for someone to say no. And what if they say yes?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's
actually, I'm going to go one step further.
Yes, definitely do.
What if it meets their needs to support you as well? Ooh. So what if it's not a detriment to the other person? What if they say yes? What if they want to say yes? What if they want to help? What if they want to support you? That takes it to another, that's a whole different way of looking at this.
Mm-hmm. Assuming that it's going to be a detriment to them, mm-hmm. when it could actually be what they need.
Right.
And while it's true we all have our own stuff, our stuff's not the same, mm-hmm. and we're not equally affected by it. So mm-hmm. what's affecting me and may be heavy on my plate may be very easy for Claire to help support me with. Mm-hmm. So it's especially important that those of us who have been affected more than others feel like they can reach out to get support from those of us in the community who might have a little bit more capacity than you do at the moment. And to have the means and the resources to be able to help the others around them. Mm-hmm. So giving people the opportunity to say, I'm sorry, I'd love to, but I can't do that right now. I don't have the capacity. Because as Claire said, they might step in and be like, yes, I can help with this. I want to help with this.
And also, like, the ideas of, like, how they're going to help with it. So I had an issue at one point where I think it might have been when I had COVID, or it might have been when I had one of the other I had a series of weird viruses over, which is very, very unusual for me. It's not very usual for me at all. And so I couldn't go out and get groceries. And so I asked a friend of mine whether they could go out and get groceries. They were actually really busy. And they said, I'm not able to do that. But if you need something, let me know. I'll Instacart it to you, which if you guys don't know, I didn't know what Instacart was when I first came out here either. It's basically ordering online and having them deliver it to you. And it was like, I wouldn't have even thought to ask for that because I didn't know that was a thing here. I didn't know that was an option. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that's a way of doing it. That does help me and it doesn't compromise them. So there are all of these potential options for ways that you can get help. So I want to just give us, I know that we're kind of getting short on time with this episode now because we've given so many great examples as we've gone through, but I just want to give a couple of quick examples because I know you had quite a recent experience with burnout, right? That created that, not the boom, but the
yes,
I witnessed.
It did create a little bit of a melty physique on me. Mm-hmm. As we've been saying, the past couple of years have just been charged in so many ways. In the last year alone, I had dealt with a lot of different things in my own personal life. I had the death of a grandparent. I'm selling my childhood home, which is what might as well be 1,000,000 miles away. So I am at the other end of the country from the house I'm selling, and things keep happening. Mm-hmm. And then there's the pandemic, and then you get sick, and then I have all these things, and then there's work, and then there's the other work, and then we had to get this done, and then there's traveling, and we're going here, and then we're coming back, and then this person's coming in, and then it's the holidays, and then it's the birthdays, and
yeah.
And if I hadn't stopped to meet my needs as they were as they were coming forward, in the ways that they were coming forward, I would not be here right now filming this. I would have gotten myself to the point of complete exhaustion, complete burnout, and the time it would have taken to recover from each individual instance in a compounded sense, it wouldn't have been possible. And not to say that I haven't burnt lower, because my candle, it melted down.
It was kind of a mini burnout, wasn't it? It was almost like a mini meltdown that was caused because of all of these outside circumstances. But as you say, because of the understanding you had about needs, I think the thing was there was so much going on that you almost didn't realize how much was affecting you. And then the moment that you did, there was like kind of mini meltdown. It was like, okay, what do I need to do now? And because of the need, you had the understanding of how to move through that.
Yeah, to kind of regroup and move on and, you know, be able to, like, yes, there's still burnout that I still need to recover from, but it's much less, and it's much less charged than when it would have been if last December I let everything pile up for the year, and then I was like, I'll deal with it, because I used to be I'll deal with it when it's all over.
Right.
It's never over. Adults, it's never over. It's never over in adulting. We all know that.
It's the same thing. Like, I'll do that when I've got time. Like, we never have just spare time. And the pandemic's a great example of like, I'll deal with this when it's over. I mean, we're 2 years in and still going. So we don't know how long this is going to last. Waiting until that point to deal with it means that we are compounding so much in the interim. Like, is there going to be an over it? Is it just going to become, rather than pandemic, it's going to become endemic, where it's just something we need to live with, but we need to find ways of doing it that work for people who are extremely vulnerable and those sorts of things. So we don't know what it's going to look like, and waiting for that quote unquote perfect time. Try again. Perfect time, no such thing to deal with it. It's never going to happen.
And ironically, burnout is really, really kind of a personal subject in the universal needs, because it's kind of what led the universal needs to be born.
And if you go back and listen to, I think it's episode 9, which is my personal story, the trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom, I go into the burnout and how I got into that burnout. But Serena's right, that I got to that point where everything was too much. Everything, like the amount of travel, there was challenges in the relationship, there were challenges with the business. And I got to the point where I needed the universal needs to help me get out of this hole that I didn't even realize I created for myself, or how it had been created and how to get myself out of it again. And so it was the most important thing, I think, with respect to that story, is it was the practice of meeting my needs afterwards that I didn't even realize I needed. And as soon as I started doing, I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is how it feels to be a resource. This is how it feels to build and heal from the burnout that I've experienced, and now set myself up in a way that I'm not spending 8 hours a day or 4 hours a day or even an hour a day trying to meet my needs. I'm doing small little incremental things that are starting that process of healing slowly but surely. And that's the thing. We want to start with the capacity, small, quick, easy, simple things that slowly will get us moving in the right direction. And that is the key to recovering from burnout and ensuring that it doesn't happen again. So anything you want to add before we finish today?
Well, let's do another hour on this one.
Yeah. You guys are up for it, right? Let's just keep going. Maybe next time. So
to be continued.
To be continued. Well, not in the next episode. The next episode, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. In fact, we're doing something a lot different on the next episode. Stay tuned is all I'll say. But what I'll say in the meantime is say thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate you. Sending you lots of love. Stay safe. And remember, between now and next time, to keep meeting your needs. Lots of love. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, to recover from burnout and stop it from happening again, the answer is meet your needs and meet your needs.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.